Zone 2 training. So what's all the fuss about? I've been hearing a lot about Zone 2 training on the internet, YouTube, people I follow. So I've never done a Zone 2 ride outside. I have been doing some cycling spin classes in Zone 2, but that's based on my FTP power. So I don't have a power meter on my bike, and I doubt I ever will, being a recreational cyclist. But I do have a heart rate monitor on my watch, which connects to my Edge Explorer. So we'll see how it goes. Do I have what it takes to be disciplined to stay in Zone 2? Do I have that skill? We'll go find out. It's a beautiful early spring day here in March in Prince Edward County. So the route I'm taking is about 50 kilometers, and of course with Zone 2, to try and stay into the lower ranges, you don't want to have something that's, too challenging or tons of climbing. It will be a little bit, but I'm interested to see how I can manage that. Now you probably have good reason to ask why a 61-year-old recreational cyclist is worried about Zone 2 training. Typically, I don't do training that much, although I have been doing some spin classes which are focused on Zone 2 using my FTP power numbers. And that's been good. Certainly that's a great way to go. Without FTP though, you need to figure out how to do your heart rate. And for me, I'm actually just using my Garmin. There's various methods you can do it. Obviously, if you do a max VO2, it's probably the best. There's an age where you do 220 monitor age, which is too low for me. So I just use what Garmin had recorded. If you take a look here now, it shows you my max heart rate and the various zone ranges. So I chose to do about 105 to 125, although I think I probably could get away with 130 in Zone 2. Coming up on this little hill here, so we'll see how it affects the heart rate. So even though it's not a power meter, I do think there is some correlation between the heart rate, and that really the biggest impact I've seen on numbers going up is really just the power you're putting through the pedals, using the biggest muscle in your body, your legs. Another thing I found is just wind. If you're against the wind, or consequently wind at your back, your numbers really go up or down. So after this ride, I actually had a discussion with my spin instructor about the differences in the zones based on heart rate and the FTP power. She said there's about a 30% difference between the two, and I really had no understanding of this until I talked to her about it. So let's take a look at an actual example now. So let's look at an example. So this is from a spin class I did just a few days after this ride. So as you can see here, the heart rate data. So this is an average 143 beats per minute and the max 168. Now keep in mind there was like a 15-minute fairly easy warm-up and like a 5 or 10-minute cool down. So it's a bit lower than the actual effort part of this would have been. If we look at the zone, that's probably around zone 4 as opposed to 2. The power average is 158 for that time again with the cool downs. My Zone 2 FTP is about 170 to 240. So you can see the Zone 2 ride is quite a bit more effort than just a Zone 2 ride based on heart rate for me. So there's the case in point about environmental factors. So I went into the bottom of Zone 3 there, even though I was going 20 kilometers an hour. with zero elevation just because the wind picked up a bit. Well, halfway in, so far it's kind of fun. Again, I haven't done a lot of structured workouts other than sprint class, so this is kind of new to me. Now, filming as well does have an impact because you're on and off the bike a bit more than you would be on a ride of only 50 kilometers. But I think it's still giving me a good indication of what it's like to do a Zone 2 ride. I mean, my speed's a lot lower than I would normally be here, and the heart rate monitor is saying I was into the bottom of Zone 3, even though I wasn't really that taxed. It's a little bit of a head game you may have to play and get used to if you're doing Zone 2. I am finding, even though I'm backing off and taking it easy, the wind has picked up a little bit, and that's really pushing the heart rate up. Alright, so let's go over how my first Zone 2 ride went. Again, keep in mind this is my first ride and I'm far from an expert in this. But I thought it'd be interesting to at least go over kind of how the first experience was for an average Joe like me. Using the heart rate data to try and structure a ride so I stay within Zone 2. So again, Zone 2 really is supposed to be good for adding fitness in a way that won't really kill you or tax you too much. Staying in Zone 2, I found for almost the entirety ride was almost like a recovery ride. Here's the information from my ride. I did almost 54 kilometers. Here's the heart rate information. It averaged out 121 beats per minute, which is close to the top end of the Zone 2. And looks like the maximum I did was 157 beats per minute. It was nice to be able to stay within that zone. A lot of my rides, like I said, end up being in Zone 3, whether I mean to or not. So after this ride, it felt pretty good, not too taxed. Things I'm not so sure about is part of the thing you might like is the structure. You may also not like the structure. I'm not so sure that I couldn't get a similar effect without all the expense of expensive heart rate monitor. And then in order to do it safely, you need to send that data to a fairly expensive cycling computer, or you can use a smartphone. And again, I'm not like competitive or anything, but I'm competitive enough for myself. Sometimes you get caught up on looking at the data. So in order to do this, to keep an eye on where you're at, you do have to kind of keep an eye on your computer a fair bit. I did find I got pretty good at maybe halfway in the ride getting a sense of where I might be based on the effort. But then there's other times to look down and say, wow, I'm at like 140, or other times, oh, it's easier than I thought. So there are some fluctuations. And also the other thing is, it is somewhat dependent, I would think, to do this and stay within that zone on certainly where your route is, as well as the conditions. I'm going to do some more of these to see how they feel and see if there's any different effect after doing it a couple different times. Well, thanks for tagging along on my first experience doing a Zone 2 ride out on my bike here in Prince Edward County, and I think I'll do some more and experiment a little bit more with that and see how it goes.